for that type of application. You've heard Navajo Power also has programs for that. And we want to continue that. I think that's something within NTEC that we've got, not just supporting native renewables, but educating the community about, green technology, ways to enhance your home for winter and summer. So we have those programs under our community efforts. So just a quick comment there. Regarding Honorable Nathan Brown's comments and questions, one of the things you talked about was reliability, and that seems to be not just a concern probably from Kayenta, but I think it's a concern from everywhere you go regarding solar versus power coming off the grid. You're always going to have some kind of risk, but I believe with combining solar with battery storage could help mitigate and offset that risk. Also, understanding the technology that's available at this time and understanding the usage of folks that are living in communities as well as living in outside the communities in remote areas to understand their utilization of energy. Requires an assessment to be done as accurate as you can. I have not heard of any. I've heard rumors of power outages in Kayenta, but that goes back to what type of technology is in place, how we are operating and maintaining the solar versus the grid, and how those transactions take place when the need arises for a cloudy day or when the sun goes down. So those go back to operational type of specifications that need to be very closely looked at regarding the developer and the contractor to make sure they have a reliable system. You talked about water allocation, and I think that's important to note. Specifically with NTEC, we are looking at developing solar on reclaimed land. So we're trying to look at areas that currently has been reclaimed. That we know that in the history of that, we have a lease on that land to reutilize and reuse the land. Another example is NGS. They have some considerable land sizes over there where I think, I don't know if they're going to be open to allowing folks to graze or to live on those lands. But again, another area that you can develop for solar without misplacing folks or impacting grazing rights and whatnot. So trying to be selective in understanding, and that begins with talking with the community. We heard from our last meeting that how does the solar grid look against Monument Valley, against other things that we have considerable cultural connection to. So those things really need to take place in the developer, and choosing your sites and getting community input is always important. And being transparent. That's one thing that I think in the news lately is very important, to be transparent and to have those dialogues with the community members, the permittee holders, and the chapters to understand what works for them. You talked also about compensation for folks that gave up their grazing rights or transferred that to the developer for solar. I think there's that negotiation that goes on. And that's something that we could certainly work with. A developer can work with the nation and the grazing permit holders to see what's fair and what's equitable to both sides, and to note that in their price per megawatt, because it all comes down as a contributing factor in that price per megawatt when you actually go bid out a job. Negotiating those efforts, understanding and talking with them, and not just taking them out to eat, walking the area with them, walking and showing them, letting them show you their land. There's history on their land, and that's something that, and wanted to talk about what's fair and equitable to both parties. Regarding environmental, you talked about birds and wildlife being impacted by solar. There are some solar grids that the technology is to gather the sunlight and disperse it. Gather from solar panels or mirrors and disperse it to a central point. thereby you can heat water or make steam and generate a turbine-like generation. And we've heard that animals flying through those rays can be killed. So that's something I believe that's being developed or has been developed in Nevada and California. So we are drifting away from that. Of course, any type of technology has to be evaluated. A biological survey is done, a cultural survey is done before any attempt to see if that land or area can be developed for solar. You have to dot your I's and cross your T's and work with the nation's requirements, as well as the people, to make sure that you do your best to mitigate any of those issues. And there's talk also about rodents or type of gophers or prairie dogs that can eat the wires underneath the panels, and thereby impacting your ability to generate power. There's also other areas, not just on the Navajo reservation, but back east, where the people are allowed to graze sheep underneath their panels to take care of the growing grass. Of course, you wouldn't want goats or horses or cows. They would damage the mirrors and the solar panels, but sheep are also allowed. So there's trade-offs between both pros and cons of wildlife impacts. So hopefully I was able to at least touch on some of the questions from your community, Delegate Honorable Nathan Brown, on some of your concerns. I think it all comes down to communication, really, and working with the community and understanding their needs, to sit down and listen. By all means, we've heard other stories of developers coming in without permission and bypassing the chapters. I've seen that in my own area in Lichi, so, and we learn from those. And so I think Navajo Power, I think Photocell, and the Intex, we want to make sure we're involving the community, the landowner, the grazing right permit holder, and trying our best to come to terms to developing solar at a large scale as well as off-grid capability. So that's our response. Yeah, thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Yazzie, for that response back. Committee members, any further questions on this presentation work session that we have for Budget and Finance regarding solar energy? I think there's no more questions on behalf of the presentation. I appreciate the time and the presentation that you provided for the Budget and Finance Committee members. We will conclude here. I don't have the agenda in front of me. Peggy, what is on the agenda here next?
Sorry, Vice Chair. It just says close of the work session, written announcements, adjournment.
Mr. Chair, Honorable Vice Chair Smith, this is Steve Yazzie with Intech. With your permission, I'd like to make one more comment.
Yes, go ahead with your comment, and we'll go ahead and close up the work session. Thank you. Mr. Yazzie, go ahead.
Thank you, everybody, for listening to us. I know it's a very challenging issue that we face as in the solar area. And maybe this is the first time that this has been brought up. Again, with previous solar developers such as NTUA already having 55 megawatts developed. But again, you've heard several speakers talk about this at all different types of angles, and we appreciate your comments and input and your discussion for the smaller scale and off the grid type of capability. But to kind of sum it up and close it out, I would like to understand what our next step is going forward. Is this something that we can vet out or sit down with the tax commission or subject matter experts in the financial field from our team with the Navajo Nation to work on some of these short-term and possible long-term recommendations, and to see if we can help get something, a future meeting, or maybe by the end of the month, or hopefully, not too long. As right now, we have a bid with a utility that is hinging on action from this communication, and if we can possibly get some directive to work to set the priority with the tax commission, at least to sit down and kind of talk about ways to hold some conversation in looking at possible solutions, if I can ask that.
Hagoshi, thank you for that question, and thank you for the presentation you provided this morning regarding the solar energy and your endeavors to provide this for the Navajo Nation. And Peggy, on behalf of that question, is there any further follow-up on this, or do we need to reschedule? Or I know that you're our advisor and you work with the presenters and setting up dates and times and schedule and revisit. Do we need to do a revisit on this?
Vice Chair and members of the Budget and Finance Committee, it's really up to the members of the committee if they wish to continue further discussions on this subject matter. I know that it was mentioned that we may need to look at the tax policies and the code and with the tax commission and such. And so we may have further discussions with the Budget and Finance, and then also it might be good to see what the RDC is doing regarding renewables and such, to see where they're at. Shiaj, Delegate Brown has his hand up, Cecilia.
Hagoshi, thank you for that info and guidance on behalf of where we're headed with this. Committee members, there's that question on the tax meeting with the tax commission, and getting further information on that, and also RDC. But we all know that holiday seasons are coming up faster than we expected, and most of the departments and divisions will be possibly having skeleton staff, even if we do teleconference. They'll be on leave, trying to take up their annual leave. But however, we'll do the best we can on meeting these issues that are brought forth and concerns that are brought forth. Honorable Brown, you have the floor.
Yeah. I guess for a recommendation, that's what I'm hearing. Maybe we should have, I would recommend another meeting with a recommendation to bring in Navajo Nation Tax Commission, and also Navajo Nation DOJ, who takes care of energy and natural resources. But if for anything to happen, again, legislation has to be dropped, and we can have a robust discussion with the rest of our 24th Navajo Nation colleagues as well. So if in the companies, we can, if you have a legislation, we can drop it, and we will definitely, and that's the best way. If the Navajo solar companies and NTEC, I would just say also just give us a legislation to drop, and we can drop it and we can move forward, and we can address a lot of these questions and duly call meetings with the attorneys and make directives. Then that would be my suggestion. So I would say, I think we're just gonna I'm not sure if the word is waste, but we will use more of our time just talking and asking some of the same questions. So actually, let me just go ahead and say, just give us a legislation to drop and we will have a discussion no matter what. It'll go through the committees, Navig-Iatke, and if it needs to Navajo Nation Council. So just draw, if you can give us a legislation to drop, we can do that. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Honorable Brown, for that recommendation. So we were just requesting to have a legislation drop, and we'll move forward with that, not to summons the rest of the recommendation that you brought forth, DOJ, RDC, and natural resources. That's what I take, and I understand that. So that request will be honored. Peggy, could you work with that and have those entities that need to supply that information for dropping legislation? We'll go ahead and move that forward. Thank you.
Yes, I can do that.
Agoshi, well, committee members, I appreciate you being in attendance in this work session, and there's some really good questions, and it sounds like we're going to be dropping legislation and be further in-depth questions on behalf of the legislation that will be presented to the committees throughout the Navajo Nation, and also go up to Navig-Iatke and eventually through council. So at this point in time, we have that recommendation for a legislation, and I take it that Honorable Brown will be the sponsor. And if not, one of us can be a sponsor for that. Right now we're at the close of work session. Any written announcements?
Mr. Vice Chair.
Mel of DOJ, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Vice Chair, members of the committee. I just wanted to indicate one thing, which is if the proposed legislation is for a tax waiver, for example, that would approve a payment in lieu of taxes and a lease or something to that effect, then the Navajo Tax Commission, neither the Navajo Tax Commission nor the Office of the Navajo Tax Commission would probably get involved in something like that. But it is the role of the Navajo Tax Commission to make recommendations to BFC and Council about amendments to the tax code. And so if what we're talking about here is actually amending the tax code instead of just a waiver, then my suggestion would be for these solar entities to work with the Navajo Tax Commission to come up with a proposal that the Navajo Tax Commission would make the recommendation for the specific language to go into a tax amendment. Or, I mean, an amendment to the tax code. That would be my my suggestion, sir. Thank you.
Thank you, Mel, for bringing that forth. We'll take that as a note on behalf of that and those that will be preparing the legislation. Make sure that what Mel has said, consider that for the waiver or the proposed statement that DOJ has made. Any further committee members or DOJ? Right now we're at written announcements. If not, motion to adjourn.
Mr. Vice Chair Smith, this is Steve Yazzie with NTEC. Just to clarify the recommendation, are you referring to the entities to work with the tax commission to if it's going to be an amendment of the tax code?
Mr. Yazzie, I'll go ahead and turn the floor over to Department of Justice. Mel, could you answer that?
Oh, yes. Thank you, Mr. Chair. That's right. My suggestion, I wasn't suggesting an amendment to the tax code. I'm just suggesting that if that's what is being pursued here, to amend the tax code as opposed to just a tax waiver, because a tax waiver is not an amendment to the code. It's just saying in this particular instance, the nation will not enforce the tax code on X, Y, and Z development or project. or lease. But if what we're talking about is actually changing the code and how the tax code will apply and be implemented, then that recommendation should really come from the tax commission. And so my suggestion is, that the tax commission be involved in developing any proposed amendment to the code. Thank you, sir.
Thank you for that clarification, Mel. Committee members, adjournment?
Doug Gilgay. Motion.
Second by Delegate Brown.
Second by Honorable Brown and motion by Honorable Elmer Begay on the adjournment. Roll call vote. Around the horn.
Vice Chair, I can proceed with the roll call vote. Honorable Elmer P. Begay.
Vote green.
Honorable Elmer Begay votes green. Honorable Nathaniel Brown.
I vote in favor.
Honorable Nathaniel Brown votes green. Honorable Amber Canes-Bacardi. Honorable Jamie Hinio. Honorable Jimmy Yellowhair.
I'll vote green. Yellow hair votes green.
Honorable Jimmy Yellowhair votes green. Chair, you have 3 members in favor, 0 opposed, and Vice Chair not voting.
Thank you for that roll call vote. We have adjourned at 11:20 a.m. Thank you, Budget and Finance Committee members. Reminder, we have a meeting tomorrow at 10. That's our regular Budget and Finance meeting. So thank you. Have a good day and enjoy the rest of your time and your busy schedules. And those that are still listening, Merry Christmas to you all and have a safe Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year. Thank you very much. Go on in.